Welcome, my name is Mike Ungar, and I'm one of the Industry 4.0 Club co-founders. The club's purpose is to further and advance the deployment of Industry 4.0 for manufacturers not only here in the United States, but abroad as well. My background includes 35 years at Michelin North America in a variety of continuous improvement, operations, finance, and HR roles. Today, I'm a focal point business coach, helping business leaders achieve their full potential. I'm joined today with my co-host, Mike Yost. Mike, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Like I said, I'm one of the co-founders of the Industry 4.0 Club, 35 years in industrial automation, industrial software arenas, and now I spent the last 15 years or so on the nonprofit side, helping manufacturers and solution providers understand, become aware, drive education, drive these types of conversations, which is right up Michael's alley. So glad to be here.
So we're really here today. We have the privilege to have these conversations here from the SESME broadcast booth in the Smart Manufacturing Zone at SME's South Tech Conference. We're joined today, as Mike mentioned, by Michael Cook. So Michael, welcome.
Thank you.
A quick introduction about Michael. He is the Director of Global Academic Engagement for Rockwell Automation. Michael's been with Rockwell in his current role for about 10 years now, and prior to that was in business development for another 10 years. He describes his mission as developing key partnerships for long-term business development objectives and executing multi-partner Industry 4.0 projects aligned with Rockwell's corporate growth strategy. We're looking forward to digging in with Michael to learn more about how he accomplishes this, because it's an interesting mission, I think, altogether. So welcome. Thanks for taking the time out of your schedule to join us.
Well, Mike and Mike, thank you very much for having me. I'm actually really excited to be here.
Yeah, so what's global academic engagement? What does that mean?
But what that really means, the engagement piece is, Rockwell as industry and our ecosystem engaging with academic institutions, really to drive the development of the future workforce. So in short, that's our commitment to work with academic institutions to really drive and bring them in a little bit into our world as industry, the excitement of automation, bring that into the classroom in a structured, systematic way, and really expose them to what we do and all the options and opportunities that they would have with the knowledge that they'll carry forward.
Yeah, that's interesting. But when the word Rockwell Automation, I think about automation and the things you do in manufacturing. How does this fit in with the mission of Rockwell Automation? That was always a strange thing to me to think about.
We talk a lot about enabling human possibility and really trying to unlock the value of the workforce with our new technology. So a lot of what we need to do as industry is to spend time with academic institutions, really bringing them, fast forwarding them into our world. Because very often we see this gap between their capabilities and the things we do in industry today. So we're trying to narrow that gap in the most creative, positively disruptive way. And the only way you can do that to lower the barriers to adoption of these new technologies is really to work hands-on with academic institutions. So we do that around the globe. It is a key part of our responsibility, and we feel responsible for the way we do business, so the communities we touch. We think a lot about sustainable communities, and also really trying to build a vibrant and sustainable pipeline of a future workforce that really understands what we do, that's passionate about it, and then can really go out and make the impacts. And I think SESME framed it up beautifully. Yesterday they talked a little bit about economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, but also about that social sustainability. So it's really about how our industry engages in a mature, systematic way with academic institutions to really build that future digital workforce.
Wow.
So could you talk a little bit about the overall ecosystem? You say the academic institutions, but there's community colleges, there's four-year colleges. I presume you have the government involved, different entities. So what's it like? I guess maybe break down the ecosystem, all of the different players that would be considered in the ecosystem there for the.
So that's a fabulous question. We heard a lot about ecosystem the last 2 days. I think what's not well understood is that ecosystem you've just described. So it's really industry. So it's not just it's Rockwell. It's companies that we are allied with, like Fanuc with robotics, Anderson Hauser with process control, Microsoft and others, that can kind of form that common mission to build that workforce and work together. So there's that part of it. The other part of industry is the manufacturers alliances and the small and medium manufacturers that need this workforce. They don't know where to find it, so they've started to really work together well, and MEPs. And then obviously the manufacturing institutes also play a thought leadership role, but also a role in transferring that knowledge. So when you think of industry, it's all of that, and it's system integrators, it's small manufacturers, and how we can work together with a common purpose to really both disrupt education in a positive way, shape the skills that are needed, and create those pathways. On the academic side, it's all of the above. It's K to grade. It's the high schools. It's how early on that we can start to really change people's mindset about the possibilities that are out there for them, and not just STEM careers, but obviously we're passionate about advanced manufacturing, understanding the real joy and the reward that comes with a career in manufacturing. It's the community colleges that have students with dual high school credits that articulate into those community colleges. It's the four-year colleges that also have students articulating from, and it's the students at four-year colleges that after 4 or 5 years, their knowledge is a little bit dated and they need to add to that go back to the community colleges. And then it's also things like we have a Veterans Academy, so we're looking at reskilling and new skilling people as well. So that's really important. And then also the ability to really provide the right insight and resources to enable really good, accurate what I would call industry training, and a lot of that can be done at the community colleges. So it's that whole ecosystem. So I've just mentioned one, which is industry. There's another piece which is obviously the academic institutions, and then within that you have consortiums, you have universities that are perhaps leaders in advanced manufacturing and applied work that stand out, and we work with many of those. And then kind of behind that, we're also looking at on the state and federal side, areas that are typically missed. So how do we diversify the pipeline to remote areas? How do we look at communities that are applying for things like recompete grants, and really trying to rebuild and bring back a vibrant manufacturing community? So we try to fill in those gaps. So when you think about education, it's complex in and of itself, and we need to understand how they work together as well. So there's an entire ecosystem that needs to collaborate.
There's a lot of dimensions to this.
So there are a lot of dimensions, and then there's another dimension, which is how do we amplify what we do as Rockwell with partners, where we can work like training companies like Amatrol, or we can get involved with other industry to develop workforce standards for occupational pathways, and then start to drive things that are more specifically linked to some of the national initiatives that we have around semiconductor, for example,
exactly.
or biosciences or rare earth elements that really matter to us as a country from a manufacturing perspective.
Added into those dimensions
Yeah.
are different roles, right? So is there a priority from your vantage point that you're working with operators, teaching them to work with smart equipment versus somebody that's deploying automation solutions, technology solutions, versus somebody who's using it to drive business process improvement, things like that? I mean, those are much different audiences. And so how do you manage that complexity? And is there any sort of priority you have, one versus the other?
I think they're all a priority, and I'll explain. So to really take advanced manufacturing forward in our country, we need to have a lot of entry-level technicians with the right skills. So the majority of those skills are going to be in those level 1, level 2 technicians, and typically those are coming out of our community colleges. So that a little bit back to my comment is, like, I think community colleges play a pivotal and incredibly compelling role in creating that pipeline and continue to upskill it. And they tend to have the most flexibility and direct connection to the industrial end use base. So, if you had to ask me to prioritize, I say those are important. But in parallel with that, driving the right thought leadership and really looking for this transformative productivity in manufacturing is something that we have to put a lot of emphasis on. So, being forward-looking, looking at the jobs of the future, looking at the applications and the systems that are going to unlock, and the technologies that are going to unlock that productivity is perhaps a little bit more critical. And I think the magic of industry working with academia is how do we take things that are typically very complex and simplify them so that they are accessible to a high school student, to someone at community college, to someone in a four-year degree program that needs to be working with the most current methodologies and technologies and understand how to integrate and unlock the value. And then at the same time, also be able to reskill and new skill. And I think what becomes really interesting, so all of that is a priority because all of that is really needed right now, but we have to be forward-looking and then really lean on our ecosystem and the academic ecosystem to really help us unlock that magic of connecting complex into an understandable context for a student.
So if I understand correctly, the way historically the community college world has worked is they would respond to what industry defined as their needs. Is that still the case? Because I know a lot of the stuff we're talking about today, like industry doesn't know necessarily what Industry 4.0 is or what these fast evolving technologies are. So, sort of going, well, what is it that we work on?
I think that, so I would say yes, but that perception and that reality has shifted. So you'll see, for example, if I just look at the manufacturing corridor between Chicago and Milwaukee, for example, there's some significant companies there that are global. And so they perhaps implementing these newer technologies faster than a small manufacturer, but the small manufacturers are also in those community college environments. And so it's really a combination of small and large and very advanced manufacturers really shaping those advisory boards with those community colleges to be that much more aggressive and forward-looking. And I think the other vector that's playing a role here is the economic development agencies in each state are suddenly starting to make a more direct, they're starting to feel and see the connection between an investment and ability to attract investment into a state for manufacturing as well as to upgrade, and the need to have the most current learning methodology and technology and organized structure around Industry 4.0 in a community college. And that wasn't that way 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'm pretty new to the economic development world, but to see the evolution there, the thought of, I know some that I've been involved with, historically it was job creation, job retention, period. And now you're looking at, well, we're short on jobs, or what are the metrics that we're going to use to define it, to justify investment?
Yeah. What has been missing there is good data. So we've got existing data for existing standard, occupational codes, but we've got all these emerging occupations where, we don't just have an industrial technician. They now need to know automation and robotics, and now they know some troubleshooting, the aspects of safety. We have connected systems now. They've got to understand a little bit around security. So some of those dimensions, I think, have definitely been missing. So manufacturing is more complex, but it's more people complex because of the integration of different disciplines. And I think that we're seeing a period of what I would call positive disruption, where the silos in academic institutions are starting to crumble, simply because industry is requiring them to provide a different kind of talent into the market.
You talked a little bit, I heard you say a couple times now, thinking and being forward thinking and looking to the future. If I ask you what's unfolding before us now that our listeners should know, in other words, when we talk about whether it's a technology or a process, or even what do you see are the latest trends that might be interesting for folks to know about?
I think there are a number of things, but I'll start with one that I think is probably on everyone's mind, and that's supply chain resiliency.
Yeah.
So we just come through a period, a couple of years, where we've really been battle tested around existing supply chain thinking. And I think that's driving a lot more of a need to understand kind of what I would call the digital supply chain, as well as the different tiers and the interoperability between the tiers and the requirements for manufacturing.
Yes.
At those levels of interoperability. And by that I mean, you're looking at resiliency, you're doing different scenario planning, but you're also contemplating a world, and I use the word digital supply chain, that's more connected. And that exposes a whole area of risk around security. And obviously cybersecurity and control of intellectual property, and a need to maybe partner on a different level with your supply chain. And that's an added complexity in manufacturing. So it really requires a different kind of thinking, a different kind of systems management, a different perspective on data, what data is going to do for you, and to get people to start thinking about design for data, design for security, and start to integrate that into their roadmap. So that's something that's real, and I think people are starting to understand that. The other one, which I think is very cool, and we get asked about a lot, is AI. And we talk a lot about explainable AI.
Yes.
And I'm going to explain what I think explainable AI is, and may have a different definition. But if you're going to go and implement an AI solution, you need to kind of design for that AI solution.
Yeah.
So you need to understand what it's going to do for you. And I think when we think of workforce, there's some really interesting possibilities unfolding with things like ChatGPT. So a case in point, I think if we understand the methodology and the personas and how we can interact with technology and a tool like an augmentation tool like ChatGPT, we can really empower someone to accelerate their learning, but we can also backstop a lot of areas where we don't necessarily have a full breadth of skill sets in an operator or even in an engineer, right? And I think it's that ability to create a model that's going to empower someone. So when I grew up in an engineering family. My dad did a lot of drawings on a big table, and there were a lot of things done with pencil and rulers. And as he was retiring, a lot of stuff is done in CAD. So this whole world of digital engineering and how we leverage that obviously is another one. Now I've mentioned three things. So think digital supply chain,
Yes.
think ChatGPT, and think the power of digital engineering. And then you start to look at just those three and how positive and potentially disruptive in a good way they can be when you think of an engineer or technician of the future.
Yeah, that's
We simply will be working differently.
Yeah. You mentioned early on we talked about partnerships, and I wanted to come back to that for a moment. Can you give us an example of a partnership you're most proud of as part of what you do, that something that you said, this is really a model that I'd like to see done over and over again?
Yeah. If I had to pick one example, that would be too limiting. So I'm going to mention a couple.
What was the name?
If I had to pick one example,
What's the name of the company?
It's too limited.
it's too limited. But
Okay.
but I'll start with one, and you'll kind of understand the vision. So about 7-8 years ago, people were talking about Industry 4.0 for real. Everyone had a different definition.
Right.
And I recall sitting down with a robotics company that's an alliance partner of ours, Fanuc and Cisco, and saying, how about we build a learning factory? And so we did. We built an automotive disc breakdown factory at a facility in Shanghai's Experiment. We started to build curriculum around it. And we found it's really hard. It's very, very hard. So building the manufacturing facility was the easiest part. It's the curriculum. It's how we apply the technology in industry and put that into an academic program such that it's comprehended and it can fit with that. And so we started to really question what Industry 4.0 is. So getting back to the partnership I'm most proud of, we sat down again with Fanuc and we said, we have to simplify this. So we went and got an Industry 4.0 grant, and we put a multi-cell system of robotics and automation, much like we put a small factory in a community college. We said, we're going to work with them to complex system that we just created and be able to scale everything to an industry and put that into a community college, an apprenticeship program, and a four-year degree program. And so we've since done that. We've done that directly with some system integrators that we work with, so we can bring that domain knowledge in. We've looked at the apprenticeship side of things, and we've looked to use that as building a platform, so now we can really get people to have a common definition of Industry 4.0, but really get them to understand what is a connected system, how is that productive for me, how do I unlock that productivity, and all the different aspects of and layers of learning, from the shop floor up to connecting this up to into the cloud and looking at the data and other levels. So for me, I guess I would say one thing we're really proud of is our partnership with Fanuc in automation and robotics, and then really being able to bring in a very industry authentic way an offering into academic institutions that's going to give them a truly authentic learning experience with pathways from an apprenticeship program right up to supporting in a mechatronics degree and even applied research of something that's highly accessible to them. So for me, that really lights me up.
Cool. Yeah,
We're doing the same. We're doing the same on the process control side with one of our partners, Anderson Hauser, and it's really all about accessibility to very valuable and relevant industry learning.
Yeah,
and if we can do that, then we can really bring those skill sets into a more structured way into academic institutions. And I know Sesame spoke about democratization. You know, I think our concept is really around both accessibility, but then sustainability of the learning and the programs and the pathways, and as we kind of adapt and bring new technology in. So,
yeah. I was going to ask, maybe it's two questions. Basically about the age of the students, right? So if we talk about digital natives, right? We talk about folks that are much more comfortable with technology than we were, and folks that came before us were. So how is that impacting the learning? Are we in the way creating curriculum that's, you know, behind where they would like to be? And then just a second question would be, is there a difference between the way things go in the US versus the rest of the world?
yeah, I think industry is moving fast, much faster than academic institutions. So that's really not the challenge. I think the challenge the real opportunity is people learn well when you can tie both conceptual and experiential learning together and run them in parallel. So that kind of hands-on applied learning is definitely a preferred route to go for learning. It's definitely more engaging. It's more engaging to work with authentic industry technology. So working on real PLCs, real robots, you know, real safety scenarios, and it's security, man-in-the-middle attacks and things. That really creates a real connection for students, really engaging. And then applying some of the newer technologies for the digital natives. So we mentioned ChatGPT. We have an applied testbed where we're experimenting with ChatGPT, but it's not about the technology, it's about the interaction, right? It's about, you know, how am I going to stand side by side with this tool and a collaborative robot and maybe augmented reality, and it's going to enrich my learning experience such that I'm extremely well prepared to work in advanced manufacturing, but with these technologies and with the methodology around it. So I think that's a piece where industry has really lagged a little bit behind. There's some universities doing some very cool and innovative things, which are frankly very exciting. And I think that there's a lot more that's being explored on this front, because it really is about, you know, for example, gamifying some of the manufacturing scenarios. If you were to gamify a factory that you'd built that can emulate a factory in a digital twin, and you can interact with it in a fun way, you really just pulling on those strings that accelerate the learning, especially with young people. But I think, all generations are starting to look at this and say, well, maybe I'm a little scared. I did some laser welding today, never done that before. It brought such joy to me, and it was such fun and so easy. And if I hadn't tried it, I wouldn't know. And so I think it's really about the opportunity to engage with technology at the base of it, and then applying the engagement methodology. Now, the second part of your question is an interesting one, and I don't know. I don't quite know where everything is going to go, but if we don't get people like really jazzed and excited about advanced manufacturing, we just use the word manufacturing, they tend to shut down. And so it's really about automation and technology and digital literacy, making that accessible, right? And making that it is the new normal. It's 2023. We can't think differently. So Cesme talked about a mindset. It's definitely a mindset change, but also a cultural change across generations, and a different way of thinking about career paths as well.
That's great. Well, we've been talking for a while now, and as we begin to wrap up, I had really kind of a final question for you. Can you kind of highlight? I'm sure you've tried a lot of things in the last decade. What are maybe one or two or three principles for success that you've seen in terms of really launching these engagements?
The way industry engages with the academic ecosystem is really important. And we've seen these different practices around the globe. So working with Rockwell in the space was business development and with universities around the globe. There's some common themes, common best practices. The first one is to have a very clear strategy as a university about what it wants to teach, what it wants to research, and how it wants to engage with industry. And then that's typically followed up by having a small but very strong, well-managed and committed industrial advisory board. So we talked a little bit about community colleges and big and small, right? So if your industrial advisory board is not engaged, they're just showing up so that you can meet your Abbott accreditation, that's not enough. You really have to be thoughtful about having a working advisory board. So to me, that's just like a basic good practice. The other one is the focus should not all be on applied research. At the same time research is happening, a university or community college or an institute should be thinking about, how do I build that workforce for that emerging economy? How do we accelerate to unlock that value, that economic value at the same time, and not let that 10 to 15 year lag happen. So I think that's starting to shift, and there's an understanding that things are moving quicker than they were, even last year or 5 years ago. So that kind of insight from industry, being able to share that is important. And then the third is, industry really working together to immerse academic institutions in what it is that we do. So, parents, career councils typically don't always understand what it is we do. Yes. And in most cases, we have a significant shortage of educators and professors that actually understand advanced manufacturing well. And so when we're able to bring them into our world as industry, we start to get a better collaboration forming. And then we're actually able to authentically influence each other on developing both programs, curriculum, credentialing, and things that are more relevant to us as industry. And I think industry has been a bit remiss in this in some regards, because it was always someone else's problem. And we think of HR, maybe HR 4.0, industry 4.0, but HR 4.0 is, talent is taken on a different dimension. We need to both recruit, we need to diversify our pipeline, we need to recruit, not just recruit and attract, but we need to retain that knowledge in our workforce where we need it most. And there's a gap with workforce planning. So having a university or community college directly connected to economic development agency or organizations like SESME that have a more national perspective.
Yes.
It kind of takes them out of their myopia sometimes, and it gives them ability to have a better strategic perspective. Then you start to get collaboration with industry that's truly meaningful, and once it's meaningful, we just engage more, and then engage more. Yeah. So it just rolls from there. And you know, we've seen some best practices around the world in Mexico, Brazil, Istanbul, Vietnam, China even, and since about 2012, we've seen some really positive shifts in the U.S. Academia moves in geologic time frames, and we're trying to accelerate that so that you know, when we bring new technology to market, we can put that fresh technology in the hands of students. We keep them engaged. By the time our end users really need them, and these new economies are emerging, we have a workforce plan that can support them.
Thank you. That's great. Mike, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, great to hear the work that you're doing on the education side of things. I do a lot of work with different nonprofits, and I know some of the conversation, one I was in recently, was around what is it that they do, who do they serve, and all the conversation was around serving the manufacturer companies and getting a workforce prepared. And one of the leaders pulled back and said, well, if I'm a student, right, or if I'm an existing worker, you need to message to me, right? And so there's a big challenge with all these dimensions that we're talking about, and it's good to see the efforts. I mean, you decade into this, right? And I think that's all positive stuff that helps us move these things forward. So
We're so lucky because, you know, our company supports FIRST Robotics. We're engaged. I mean, I'm on the first board in Wisconsin. We live this because it's important not just to our business, but to our manufacturing community, to our economy, and our end users. So we have passion literally from the top down. It's a good place to be, and we're excited about what's coming with U.S. manufacturing.
Thank you, Michael. And Mike, thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. Mike, thank you as well. So if you like these kind of conversations, please look for additional Industry 4.0 broadcasts on women in manufacturing, the future of manufacturing, Fireside Chat, and people, process, and culture on our LinkedIn page and on our website at www.industry40club.com. Also, please look for us at our next live event, which will be in California in February at IME West in Anaheim. And thank you all for your time, and everybody have a great day. Thank you.